deny us our status of importance and contribution to the world. And that's what's taken place over the last 6 centuries. So that has to change. And it'll be an educational process for everyone. And I firmly believe at the end, it will make for a much more, a much better and composite world. And based upon mutual respect for all of us. Because we cannot progress as a people. And we cannot progress in harmony with other groups unless we have the mutual respect and the respect that we're due. Well, I come from a world of collectives, and I've competed with various collectives at various auction houses and in galleries for purchase and so on around the world for private collection. And I've found that there are all types of people that collect African art and in many cases artifacts. And many of the people collect the pieces just for their aesthetic beauty and their intrigue and the power that you can see in the physical forms of certain of the pieces, and this power that the particular artisan who made it, who's unknown, instills through his craftsmanship in those pieces. But those people, many of them collect out of a sheer vantage point or perspective of ignorance. They know nothing about the piece itself. They know nothing about the history of the piece, nor do they care to know. And many people of different ethnic groups collect pieces as a symbol of power unto themselves, because collecting some of the most important and expensive pieces of African art in the world, for some people, is also a statement of power that they hold over African people. I'm a firm believer that, in general, those who own your artifacts and your greatest art pieces that were collected by your ancestors, when they own those, they in fact think they own you as well. And when you don't take the time as a people of African descent to learn the importance of your own heritage and what your ancestors created and instilled within these pieces that they created, and you let them go into other hands, then you will not be due respect, because it's so important that you know your history and where you come from. So the only way that we can sort of level the playing field, and what I'm really saying is that we cannot point to other groups and blame them for everything. A lot of the problems that we and the burdens that we carry as a people are due to our own lack of due diligence in taking our hands and putting it around and trying to understand and reach out to grab our own history and our own story. Because if you don't know your story, how can you expect anyone to respect you and your story if you don't know it yourself? And what's worse, if other people know your story and realize you don't, number one, they will never respect you. And number two, they will never share your story with you if they think you don't know. I can tell you for a fact that many people of other cultures and ethnic groups that have visited and seen my collection, which are very restrictive, obviously, to who comes and sees my collection, because it's not open to the public. Those people have come here, have literally, in a very, very respectful way, sort of bowed to me, and they look at me with different eyes, because they know this is one man, a black man, a man of color, who knows who he is. It's obvious when they walk in, and they understand. And I'm treated with a certain amount of reverence, which I respect, and I return to them. Because I believe in people that, no matter who they are, where they come from, if they treat you with respect and reverence, it's your obligation to return that respect and reverence. And that's the basis in life that I travel, and I think that we all should. I know for a fact, I mean, I hate to say this, but I firmly believe in speaking the truth as I see it, is that there are many people who collect African art, and I've met many of them in various galleries and auction houses that are sheer racists. And sometimes when I get in discussions with those type of people, and I start telling them about certain pieces. I give them no idea the magnitude of my collection, but I tell them certain pieces I have. They look at me as a man of color, and they don't believe me. They wonder. They don't see, how could you possibly own that? Well, it can't be right. It can't be real, because they don't think we are entitled to own our own culture and our own heritage and our own great pieces, and which has been a lifelong quest of mine. And those particular type of people would certainly like a collection like this to vanish. And I'm sure those type of people, if they had the wherewithal, would purchase it to make sure that happened. Well, what sparked the idea of collecting, like I said before, was my early education as a youngster. I'm talking about the age of 6, 7, or 8, by my father, whose name was James Edwards, about our culture and our history. He wanted to make sure that we, his children, were empowered to know their history and where they came from and why they were just as important as anyone else in the world. And he did a great job in doing that. But what inspired me to go forward because my father was not a collector. He was just a study of history. And what inspired me to go forward into the collecting side, because of that, those embers that were burned in me as a youngster, I always had this love of myself. Never conceited love. I never loved myself that much. But I had this respect of myself. But not only myself, but my friends, my peers, my schoolmates. I had this respect that just glowed more and more. Because I loved myself and I loved them. Because I knew who they were, even though many of them didn't know who they were. And I knew who we were as a people. And that love never died in me. Even though I went on a path of technology, I became a network designer for AT&T, and I traveled all around the world in business and so forth. And I'm a workaholic by nature, so I put a lot of hours in, and I loved working hard. I loved excelling. I loved striving for the best that I can be. And but that love of Africa, whenever I came back, there was always, when I was gone and when I came back, I always had that love of Africa inside of me. And then in the very early 70s, I started purchasing pieces in galleries and in auctions and so on and so forth. And it just never stopped. It just got greater and greater. And as I purchased, I also studied. I bought the books to learn about. If I didn't know about the piece I bought in detail, I bought the books that covered that subject matter, those people, those ethnicities, that tribe, that kingdom, whatever. And I studied it, and I found out the true importance of that piece, why it was created. And plus something I did over the years that's very important, I became friends with many, many Africans. And I learned many secrets that they don't put in books from the different peoples and what their grandfathers taught them through, as I mentioned before, the griot system, that knowledge that was handed down from grandfather to father to son and grandson. So I put it all together, and so I have this knowledge that my sister wants to make sure doesn't die with me.
Right. Well, the brother said a mouth
Still exists to this day. If I go, for example, to Sotheby's and there's 500 or 1,000 people in the room, at an auction, there's usually no more than 2 or 3, 4 people of color in the whole room. And that's really, it hurts when I see it. I mean, I should be used to it now, but it hurts because we as a people economically have advanced a long way as far as our buying power. And I need to give a dissertation on the buying power of African Americans and people of African descent in the United States. But we don't put any of our money within our culture and our history and to buy our artifacts. One of the things that drove me to buy African art, besides the sheer love, there's something that grabs me about it. I always felt by every piece that I purchased, I was purchasing a part of my past and my history back. I was purchasing a part of me back. I was putting me, the pieces back together. So I always felt like I won a battle in a war when I would win a piece at an auction. And there are certain pieces within my collection that others have tried to purchase from me and offered quite some substantial sums of money that I turned down because I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't give those pieces back after what I went through to get them. And there are certain significant ones that I could point out, that I could give you stories on that are quite interesting, to say the least. But I always felt I was buying part of my history back, and I still do to this day. It's another piece of our culture and our history that I buy back. And I try to tell people that they need to get involved with African culture and art. I try to tell people every African American and people from the African diaspora should own a piece of African art. It doesn't have to be a collectible piece of art. It doesn't have to be expensive, but they should own a piece of art. And the only thing that I tell them is that they should make it a point when they buy a piece of art, African art, even if it's from a street vendor in the street, know what country it came from, know what people it represents, and know why it was created, what was its purpose, even if it's a replica. It doesn't matter. They should know that, because when they learn that and they can answer those three questions, they're learning something about themselves. And of course, those people of means that have much more substantial funds to buy Ferraris and Jaguars and so on and so forth, yet you'll go in their homes and there's not a piece of African culture and art. I just think that's terrible. I think that's a horrified statement that so many of us make, and I pray one day that it changes. Oh, Gil Noble, one of my icons and people that I deeply revere and deeply miss. Thanks to Dr. Adelaide Sanford, the revered Dr. Adelaide Sanford, who I've known for many years and consulted with for many years. She introduced me to Gil Noble. She told me that Gil was a person I had to meet, and she was one of Gil's closest confidants. And she said Gil also had to meet me. So a meeting was arranged after I had actually gotten to know Gil Noble for a period of a year and a half. But this is also due to Dr. Adelaide Sanford. At the time, his wife was ill, and he was spending most of his spare time going to take care of her. But I would speak to Gil probably about once or twice a week. And it was amazing. I had his private number. And I would call, whenever I would call him, he was one of those amazing people that would always pick up the phone and speak to you if you had that number. And typically whenever I spoke to him, most of the conversations were at least an hour. And I used to wonder how he had time to do his show if he spoke to other people as long as he spoke to me, And we got to know each other very closely over a period of a year and a half. And so it got to the point where Dr. Sanford would not take no from an answer from him. She said, Eric, he has to. Now, all of this took place. We discussed history, Africa, artifacts, a lot of things about him that were personal that were never on this TV show. And I used to tell him that, Gil, you need to be interviewed yourself. Because I said, for some of the stories you told me, man, it would make one heck of a broadcast. He would laugh. But anyway, Dr. Sanford, she sort of put up the pressure on him. She said, I'm not taking no for answer. You have to get over and see Eric's collection. So finally he came on a Saturday. He came on a Saturday morning, and he was amazed over my collection. And he took me downstairs. He spent the whole day with me. My sister was here, my brother and some other, Dr. Sanford was here. And he took me downstairs, and we were downstairs talking together while the other people were upstairs. And he said to me, he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, man, you did it. And I looked at him, a little perplexed. Then he said it again. He said, man, you did it. And I said, Gil, what did I do? He said, you did it. He said, you put this together. He said, Eric, it's incredible. He said, you know, he looked me dead in the eye, and he said, you know, you're going to be famous. And I told Gil, I looked at him dead in the eye, and I said, Gil, I don't want to be famous. I said, I just want my life's work and my collection to educate our people and our children, because they need it more than I do. You know, I said, I don't need the fame, you know. And he said, I'm going to start working with you at a different level from this day forward. So we came back upstairs, and we all sat at the table. Dr. Betty Dotson was here as well. And he told Adelaide, with all of us at the table, he said, I want to have a meeting here every other Saturday. He said, we have to start moving together. And he told me and Adelaide, or Adelaide and I, that he wanted to combine his archives with my collection in an institution, in a museum or educational research center. And you see, this had culminated from many conversations Gil and I had over the phone over a period of time, because he discussed with me in detail where he did not want his archives to go. You know, I don't want to say too much about that, but he told me where he did not want his archives to go. And since I knew technology, I knew how to I understood distributive computing and data centers and storage and all that kind of stuff, and how the data could be accessed and distributed. You know, we discussed various scenarios and topologies, how his goals could be accomplished without moving his collections to certain places that were being suggested to him by other people. You know, and he came upstairs and he told everyone he wanted to have a meeting here every other week to discuss how he could combine his historical film archives with my collection in one center. And it was kind of funny because Adelaide looked at him. She said, Gil, we can't have a meeting every other week. We have to make sure we have an agenda and we have something to accomplish every other week. You know, so that following week, not the following week, we had that meeting on a Saturday. That Monday, he called me from ABC Studios, and he told me that he wanted me to come in the following Wednesday. He said, Eric, are you ready? And I said, ready for what? He said, I want you to come in. He said, we don't have any time to waste. I want to start filming. He said, I want to start interviewing you on the show, you know, in your collection and about your collection, you know. And then Adelaide subsequently spoke to me, and she said, Gil wants to do 3 episodes on you, you know. So I told Gil, I said, Gil, you know, I could come in on Wednesday and we can do that. But I said, I thank you very much for the invite. And I know, and it's very precious to me because of my esteem that I hold for you. I said, but I feel I only have one shot at this. And I said, well, if I come on your show, I want it to be very powerful. I said, I want to be able to reach every youth that's out there and reach them and make them see how important it is to learn what we already know. And I said, I would like if we do the first episode, I said I would like to bring Adelaide with me to have her on my right. And I said on my left, I would like to have Ralph Carter, who's a dear friend of mine. You know, Ralph Carter, who played Michael on Good Times. We're very close friends. And I don't know how many people know it, but Ralph is very astute in African history. Me and him have had wondrous conversations. He's very well read and knowledgeable in African culture and history. And in fact, Ralph is very important to me because it's through Ralph that I met Adelaide Sanford many years ago, and we became very, very close friends ever since. And so Gil told me, he said, okay, Eric. So we made preparations for me to go in the following Wednesday. I was supposed to be there at 1 o'clock at ABC Studios. So I spoke to him on the Friday before, and like late in the afternoon, like around 3:30 or something like that. And he told me, he said, okay, Eric, you know, you're scheduled to come in here. And he said, I'm looking forward to seeing you. We're going to get this thing started. And he said, the last words he said to me were, he said, well, Eric, make sure you call Wednesday morning. Because he said, you never know what can happen. He said, make sure you call. So anyway, Wednesday morning I called, like about 10 o'clock. He didn't pick up his phone. You know, and that was odd to me. So I shrugged it off. I said, I'll wait like an hour and try again. I called again. He didn't pick up his phone. You know, and then I called at 11:30. He didn't pick up his phone. And I didn't want to think anything negative, so I went to the subway and proceeded to Manhattan. And when I got there, and I asked for Gil, I said I was there to go to Gil's office. They told me he hadn't come in. Then I called his office, and I asked for the executive producer. Her name is Tracy Bagley. And she answered the phone, and I told her, you know, I'm supposed to meet with Gil today. And she told me Gil took ill over the weekend, and he would not be in. And of course, I asked her, how, was it anything serious? I was nothing serious, and this and that. And I don't think she really knew or had all the information. So she said, no, she doesn't know. So we're hoping he'll be back in soon. So you know the story from there, what happened. So the 3 episodes that we were going to do never took place. Historically, to my knowledge, I was the last person scheduled to be interviewed on his show. And it was devastating to me, not because I couldn't do the interview, certainly, but I had built such a friendship up with this man who was one of my idols along with Paul Robeson, you know, and Malcolm X, and Marcus Garvey, Dr. Henry Clark, but he was certainly near the top of the list. That for him to have a stroke like that, and which I still felt he had so much to contribute, even though we all know how much he did contribute. It was just devastating to me. And there hasn't been many things in my life that knocked me for a loop, but that one did. Because in the words that he spoke to me last was that, well, Eric, make sure you call in the morning because you never know what can happen. And after he said it, we both laughed, you know. And of course, something did happen. And we lost one of the most iconic figures in our culture when we lost Gil Noble. So I still feel something when I talk about him. I never think about this too much, to tell you the truth, because I'm a person that I live in the moment, but I see far into the future at the same time. I have sort of like a duplex personality and a duplex scope, and I never take anything for granted. You know, so I never think in terms really of what people should remember me by. But I guess if I have to answer that question, I would say it's my contribution to our people. Because remember me by the contribution to myself as far as enriching myself with the love of our culture and its importance, and to know that we are important, just as important as anyone else. And we've given this world so much that we haven't been given credit for. And my contribution is to make that story known, if I can possibly do it. And I only can do it with the help of others. That's my contribution. So my contribution can never be singular. It only can be communal, as far as the help I get from others to make our story known and our contributions to the world. Because I know that's truly the only way we can lift our children up and enable them to reach the potential that they certainly can reach. What's up to the children? You are the future leaders. You are the future standard bearers. You have to learn. You have to excel. Dig deep into yourself. Find out what your heart's motivation is. Experiment with different and noble things. Try different things. Don't be afraid of failure. Failure is okay because you learn from failure. You learn how to pick you up, but then you find out what your talents are. By all means, what's up to you? Find out who you are, because when you find out who you are, you will excel at whatever you choose to follow in life.
Yes, sir. Well, he said it. The saying goes, life is what we make it, or make of it. And we only get one shot. I'm extending the beach. That's a good shot. Oh, 36 minutes. Did a little thing.